Autumn came early. It seemed that not long ago it was unbearably hot, and then it suddenly turned cold. The wind blew dry yellow leaves across the pavement, gently lifting them into the air. "Listen, are you sure we'll be in time?" Virginia asked her fiancé, with worry in her voice. Howard nodded and waved his hand artistically, letting his girlfriend know that he had everything under control. The couple was rushing to celebrate the 5th anniversary of their friend's married life. The celebration would take place in a restaurant in the park. "It won't be nice if we're late, and we have at least 10 more minutes to walk. And I am in heels." Virginia was angry. She nervously glanced at her watch and shook her head irritably. "No big deal, even if we're a few minutes late. We're not going to the president's appointment. Please be calm. Why are you so nervous?" Howard tried to reassure his girlfriend. Suddenly, 3 girls of about 13 years old jumped out from behind the trees and ran up to the young couple. They began babbling, gripped by excitement and trembling. "Help, please! There's a little abandoned house nearby. We were walking from school and heard kittens squeaking. They must have lost their mommy, and they must be hungry. We can't open the door. Mister, please rescue the kittens. Otherwise, they will die of cold and hunger," the girls pleaded. Howard stared in confusion at the girls' pale, worried faces while they begged him for help. Suddenly, a picture of his childhood flashed before his eyes. He was 6 years old at the time. He was very fond of his red-haired kitten and took good care of him. But one day, his furry little friend climbed up a tree and could not come back down. Howard stood under a tree in despair and cried loudly, realizing that he could not rescue him. At that moment, a man was walking by. He found out the reason for the child's tears and, without hesitation, climbed into the tree and took out the frightened kitten from there. During the rescue mission, the man slightly tore his shirt, but this did not upset him in the slightest. He handed the shivering kitten back to the sobbing Howard with a smile and walked away, telling him to take care of the kitten. Howard looked after the man for a long time and was sure that he was a superhero. "Howard, do you remember where we're rushing off to? It's silly to waste a lot of time on some kittens when our friends are waiting for us at the restaurant." Virginia brought her fiancé out of his reverie. "Virginia, honey, go on your own, and I'll join you soon. Believe me, it won't take much time. In 10 minutes, I'll be with you." Virginia threw a disapproving look at her boyfriend and said she would go with him. The little girls clapped their hands and led Howard and his angry girlfriend to the abandoned lodge, which was really close by. Howard pulled the doorknob, but the door would not budge, and only when the man applied maximum effort, the door finally opened. "Oh no!" exclaimed Virginia suddenly in panic. "Look at you! Your white shirt isn't white anymore. You're dirty. How will you go to the restaurant dressed like that? What a nightmare! It's disgraceful! You've ruined everything." Howard glimpsed at his shirt and then waved his hand and went inside. He turned on the flashlight function on his phone and started shining it around the room, looking for kittens. But to his great shock, he found 2 babies on the floor, lying in a pile of rags. The barely audible sounds really resembled the squeaks of kittens. "Babies?" gasped Virginia. "Let's call the police and get out of here. I'm sick of being stuck in this filthy, smelly place." "I can't leave these kids here. They need to be taken care of. Why don't you go to the restaurant yourself and congratulate your friends? I probably won't make it tonight. Please don't forget to apologize to them for me." "What? Are you crazy?" Virginia was already furious. She had bought a beautiful dress, was going to have a fabulous evening, and now all her plans were falling apart. Until I see the kids are safe, I'm not going anywhere. Do you realize that anything can happen to these defenseless children? We'll stay here. Some abandoned children who have been abandoned even by their own parents are more important for you than your own fiancé and friends, shouted Virginia with anger and resentment, and hurried away. Howard took the girls' phone numbers just in case, and taking the children gently in his arms, he hurriedly carried them to his car. He put the babies on the back seat, fixed them securely, and drove to the nearest children's hospital. It only took him a few minutes to get there, as the hospital was very close. The man also called the police on the way. In the emergency room, a pretty red-haired nurse named Angela took the babies away from Howard and brought them in for examination. Soon the police arrived. Howard told them in detail how he had found the babies and gave them the numbers of the girls who had mistaken them for kittens. The examination of the babies and communication with the police took several hours. Howard could not go away without making sure that the children were all right. It was almost 10 o'clock when Angela came up to him and said in a tired voice, "The children have been checked. They are both healthy. They were hungry and a little cold, but don't worry. They have already been fed and warmed up, and you should have a cup of hot coffee too. I'm taking a short break, and I suggest we go downstairs and have some coffee." Howard agreed. The fragrant drink perked him up and lifted his spirits, and Howard enjoyed the company of a sociable and smiling girl in a white uniform. Angela admired the fact that he didn't leave after calling the police, but waited patiently for news of their health. "I didn't do anything special. That's what anyone would have done in my place," the man blushed. He came out of the hospital around 11 o'clock. There was no desire to go to the restaurant. He was tired, but happy that he had saved the children and placed them in good hands. He drove by the park, thinking that tomorrow he would have to call his friends and explain to them what had happened today. Unfortunately, Oleg and Katya were very vindictive and resentful. Stopping at a red traffic light, Howard involuntarily looked in the direction of the restaurant, the entrance to which was just clearly visible between the two bushes. At that moment, the door opened and Virginia came out into the street. But she was not alone. The girl was holding the hand of a guy whom Howard had met a couple of times in friends' parties. Stopping not far away, Virginia and the guy began to kiss. Then he put his arm around her thin waist and whispered something in his ear. Howard was shocked by what he had seen and realized that Virginia was not the girl he would live his life with. Early in the morning, right after waking up, he called Virginia and said in a calm tone, "I'm calling so early because I think the new day should start with truth. And the truth is that you and I are not a couple anymore, and I am not going to marry you. You can forget about our engagement. All the best to you and that guy you were kissing outside the restaurant last night." Without waiting for a response from his now ex-fiancé, Howard hung up the phone. A few days passed, and he decided to visit the babies in the hospital and find out what would happen to them next. Thoughts of abandoned children did not give the man any peace. He even tried to imagine the face of the woman who had dared to leave her newborn son and daughter in a dirty, abandoned, cold place. At the hospital, to Howard's big pleasure, he met Angela again. "Hello, Angela. I've come to inquire about the fate of the babies. How are they?" Angela smiled and replied, "They're fine. Their mother has been found. She turned out to be a migrant. She'd already signed a waiver for the children. She has no place to live, no money, no relatives. She didn't need the little ones. It's all said, Angela sighed. Howard was shocked by what he had heard. In his heart, he had hoped that the children would be taken away by their parents. But now an uneasy fate awaited them. The man was visibly upset, but then calmed himself by thinking that they would be much better off in a nursery or with foster parents than with such a mother. Angela, when is the end of your shift? There's a nice cafe nearby. If you don't mind, we could have a cup of coffee and talk a little, suggested Howard, realizing that he would not want to leave his new acquaintance. I'd love to, and I'll be free in an hour, Angela replied, pleasing Howard. They sat in the cafe for several hours. During this time, they had time to discuss medicine, education, tell each other about their hobbies, and plans for the future. Young people communicated as if they had known each other for years. With each passing minute, Howard became more and more clear that he would like to spend all his time with Angela. He took the young nurse's phone number and called her that same evening. They chatted half the night and all the next day. Howard was shining with happiness, understanding that he really had fallen in love. The young couple began to develop a relationship rapidly, and they both plunged headlong into it. Only one thought clouded Howard's soul. It was about babies abandoned by their own mother. The man felt he had a part in their destiny and constantly thought about what it was like for the children in the orphanage. A little later, he began to think about adopting twins. A few months later, when the relationship between Howard and Angela moved to a new level, the man decided to share his thoughts and plans for the children with his beloved. Angela, let's visit the babies tomorrow, suggested Howard. That's a good idea. I've been thinking about it too, admitted the girl. You and I have never discussed how many children we would like to have, said Howard cautiously, hugging Angela. Personally, I dream of having many ringing children's voices in my house. The more is better. Angela smiled sweetly. You obviously want 2 soccer teams, boys versus girl. I wouldn't say no. I also want to adopt the twins. Are you serious? Exclaimed Angela cheerfully, raising her head sharply and looking at Howard frozen in expectation. To tell you the truth, I've been secretly dreaming about it myself ever since I first saw those children. I've become very attached to the little ones, and I can't allow them to grow up in an orphanage. Howard was so happy that he hugged the girl tightly in his arms and covered her face with tender, reverent kisses. 2 weeks later, their wedding took place, and only the closest people were invited. The newlyweds immediately began collecting adoption papers and preparing for the arrival of a son and daughter in their home. A few months later, they were able to get the legal right to raise the twins. This is how Howard found his true happiness, and the twins found their loving parents. Narrated by Deidre Eby.